Now you take the black reparations. Why black reparations suddenly become a talking point? I find it funny because Atlantic magazine ran Ta-Nehisi Coates' article on it. Up until Ta-Nehisi Coates' article, yes, it existed in the black community. It was completely marginal. And it's funny that an alabaster white periodical launched the idea of black reparations and launched Ta-Nehisi Coates' career. Because, of course, from their point of view, it's a great topic. You know why it's great? Because it's politically completely irrelevant. That's why it's great. It's for Martha's Vineyard, the chattering classes, to talk about black reparations, invite Ta-Nehisi Coates, have a very serious conversation, then the wine and cheese. They were the ones that launched it. If Ta-Nehisi Coates hadn't published the article in Atlantic magazine, nobody would even be talking about. Okay, on the margins it was discussed, but it wasn't a national issue. It wasn't a national issue. It's the same thing with Angela Davis. Prison abolitionism. Everybody's inviting her. She used to be in the FBI's 10 most wanted list. Now she's on the Martha's Vineyard 5 most coveted list. Everybody wants to hear Angela talk about prison abolitionism. Everybody wants to. Why? You know why? Because it's completely irrelevant. Yes, we all would like to see prisons abolished. Fine. If you're a Marxist, and Angela used to be a Marxist, you also want to abolish money, right? Okay. So right now, the capitalist system is facing, I'm not sure if I would call it a crisis, I would call it an impasse. It's unable to do what any system has to do in order to command legitimacy, which is improve the living standard of the broad masses of people from generation to generation. If you can't do that, you lose your legitimacy. A government, a system loses its legitimacy. So capitalism is unable to do that. So I ask you a simple question. Is there anybody in his or her right mind who would say, in order to solve the current impasse of the capitalist system, we need to abolish money? Would anyone say that? No, you'd be certifiably insane. So we have a major problem in our society, mass incarceration. Talking about abolishing prisons in order to solve the problem of mass incarceration is exactly the same as talking about abolishing money in order to solve the problem of the impasse in the capitalist system. It's completely irrelevant. There's no relationship to reality. That's why they love her to talk about it. That's why they love Ta-Nehisi Coates to talk about black reparations. You can sound really cool, really woke, really hip, abolish prisons. And as a side note, you're completely irrelevant, which is why the white elites love you. Now, everywhere Angela goes, I watch her on YouTube. You should see. Amy Gutman, the president of University of Pennsylvania, I knew her when she was at Princeton. She was just a very milquetoast liberal. She's breathless as she introduces Angela. Then the second biggest billionaire in South Carolina is a woman. She introduces Angela and says how much we have in common. They all love her because she's a complete irrelevancy, completely irrelevant, which is what identity politics is in general. It's totally solipsistic, self-serving, irrelevant. It's nonsense. It's nonsense.
I hear you. The last video we did, we had when we had gone back and forth on reparation, and I agree with you mostly on the critique of identity politics. I'm not a fan of identity politics, and you are right. And that's part of the ruling elite's strategy since the neoliberalism, where the system has failed to lift the standard of living of most people. The alternative strategy has to make the ruling elite a little more colorful. So the White House has become more colorful, or the corporations have become more colorful, and that's like that. Most people would agree with you that that doesn't help. That said, I mean, my concern is like when you speak the way you spoke about, say, Black women, I am a little bit concerned about that, because when I look at history of African American, I mean, domestic worker is a terrific example to look at the unique history of Black women. I mean, you
I
don't
think you should. Listen, I have no problem with that. I've told you that. I think the whole history of the left, not the whole history, but a large part of the history of the left has been struggling with how you integrate the class question with questions. When you use question, you're talking about oppression, the Jewish question, and what was called the Negro question, the woman question, uh, integrating it with special oppressions and figuring out how they relate on a theoretical level and on a practical level, on an organizing level. Yeah, these are complicated questions. I have no doubt about that.
Mhm.
But what I'm saying is, A, it has a long history, and B, identity politics doesn't struggle at all because there is no class question in identity politics. It doesn't exist.
Right.
It exists in the left. The left tries to figure these questions out and always seeing class as fundamental. Exactly what fundamental means, I don't know, but it sees it as fundamental. I think it's fundamental for a very obvious reason. Sometimes you don't have to strain theoretically. You look at things as a practical matter, as a political matter. So let's take the question of the Black reparations. Okay, Bernie was pressed hard on this question, and Bernie was attacked because he refused to support Black reparations, though he said if a Black reparations bill came before him as president, he would sign it. Why didn't Bernie just come out in favor of Black reparations like Elizabeth Warren or Beto O'Rourke? Why didn't he? Well, the answer was very obvious. Because Bernie, and to a lesser extent, but it was there, Biden, who was also against Black reparations, they were trying to build a class coalition. It wasn't because Bernie was a racist or not a nice guy. He knew that if you're trying to build a class coalition, that this Black reparations could undermine it, undercut it. Because there are a lot of white workers who would say, "What did I have to do with slavery?" And you know the whole litany. I don't have to go through it with you. So for him, it was a practical question. We want to build a coalition that's very broad, because that's all the left has. It has numbers. It doesn't have money. It doesn't have political power. It's got numbers. And the only way you can win is by unifying people around a broad constituency, a broad program. And so Bernie tried to build a class coalition, not the 99% of Wall Street's of Occupy Wall Street, but of the 80%. And he recognized that you have to take into account the special oppressions of non-white workers. And so if you look closely at his program, he always said, we're going to invest more in the inner city. We're going to, if we legalize marijuana, we will give the jobs to those who were in jail because of marijuana possession. He always, and of course, who is going to benefit most if you abolish college tuition? Who is going to benefit the most? The poorest are going to benefit the most. Who is going to benefit the most if you abolish student debt? The poor are going to benefit the most. If you're in the middle class, generally your parents paid off that debt. It was the poor who were going to benefit the most. Who was going to benefit the most if there was a universal health care? Well, if you're in the middle class, you have some health insurance here or there, okay? So his whole program could be summarized as benefits everyone. However, it benefits those groups which have suffered the most even more. An extra, a plus, you know? So for him, that's how you deal with the special oppression of other groups without breaking the class coalition. So when I say it's very hard to theorize it, it's very hard to figure out how you organize around these principles. It's very hard to practically address these questions. I thought the Bernie formula, which was kind of, you would call it jerry build, was makeshift. It was basically right. A broad class coalition, but a plus for those who suffer more, which meant basically minorities. Okay? So I recognize that has to be addressed, but that's not happening with identity politics. Identity politics simply casts off the class question because they have no interest in poor Black people. They have interest in getting their fair share of the ruling elite positions financially and in terms of power. That's what they want. And the disparities mean there are 13% of Americans are Black, so we want 13% of that 1%. We want 13% of that 1%, the elite. We want 13%. That's all they're concerned about.